Hi, our guest today is Milford Police Chief Tom O'Laughlin. My co-host Al Holman is on vacation today. Chief, thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
I guess the easiest thing to start with is the Portuguese picnic was held this past weekend. Very quiet from a police standpoint.
Yeah, the event it went very, very well. We had, as you know, nice, sunny, hot weather. So from our perspective, we expect things, to have some shifts to it. We had no issues at all. Saturday evening, we had a range of, during the day, including the evening, probably about 12,000 people. The entire area was full Saturday evening, not a single incident. We did take some young people to the hospital. They arrived there and shouldn't have been drinking. And
Yeah, there were a few people who had a little.
Yeah, and then we did have some heat exhaustion issues, so the fire department and EMS being on site were very, very helpful. Sunday is quieter, more family oriented.
Not as much people.
No, far less. So all day Sunday, we probably saw in the area of about 3,000 people. Into the evening, you had about maybe 1,500, so a marked decrease, and that's the usual.
Right.
Sundays, you have the parade. It's more festive as far as traditional dance, traditional music.
I noticed more party going as you went up Water Street, more in the front yards of Water Street than at the actual Portuguese club.
Yeah, you tend to have in the neighborhood a number of cookouts, their own family picnics.
Right.
And many of those folks gravitate towards the Portuguese club in the evening for the bands and the rest. So Mr. Marias had his band Sunday night, well known in the Portuguese community. In fact, sells a lot of music in Portugal and is very good. So tracks the family crowd much more so on Sunday.
Right, but at the same time, the same weekend, not related to the picnic at all, you had 4 ODs from heroin.
Right. So we still face a number of tragedies as it relates to the opioid epidemic, in particular heroin overdoses. We did have 4 overdoses in a 24-hour period. There was 1 death in the 4. We, like every other community in this country, frankly, are experiencing a significant increase. We're seeing now 44 overdoses just this year, and 8 of them were deaths.
Wow.
So we've already surpassed last year in total.
Well, it's not just a Milford problem, as you said. It's
Oh,
everywhere
most
in the
certainly.
country.
Most certainly. The DEA just put out a report, which they did a survey of what they're seeing nationwide, and then from the source countries of Colombia and Mexico. So you look at that information, and every region of this country is experiencing this, and every community, regardless of size. If you take Worcester County, 53 communities, and you do it by population, frankly, a small community like Hopedale, by population, saw a greater number of deaths than even we did.
Yeah.
And that's simply, where did the person go to
Buy or use.
Well, right, to use, and as you know, we've had a number of issues in the various fast food restaurants or coffee restaurants, so whether it be Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because you give the selectmen a report every quarter, and it sort of shifted from in the old days, you'd think of trouble at a liquor license place, and not necessarily trouble with calls, but the owners and employees of these places are doing the right thing by calling when they see something out of line, whether it's somebody in a restroom or somebody not looking well, just sitting there.
They've been very proactive. We work very closely with the owners and management of particularly McDonald's and Dunkin'
Dunkin'
Donuts have
yeah.
been the most receptive. And we had detectives go in and actually provide them with training of indicators, things that they should look for, things that detectives look for, frankly, when they're on the street. We had a call this weekend, and just to show how proactive they're being, we had a call this weekend. The employees at the Dunkin' Donuts saw an individual go into the men's room, was in there for a period of time, which kind of exceeded, caused concern because, if you're going in to use the facilities,
Yeah,
you shouldn't be locked in there for, 25, 30 minutes unless
Right.
there's something that, so they had a concern that this person may have overdosed in there. And as a result, they called us. We went, and it just happened to be an individual who wanted to, take residence in the men's room. So, thankfully it wasn't an overdose, but they have called us.
But they're doing the right
in
thing by
situations.
calling.
Most certainly. And it's
But you're
it's
the-
not centered just on those properties, though. I want people to appreciate the fact that anywhere you have public restrooms, we're experiencing these issues. So whether it be public buildings, you take the city of Boston, one of the largest areas that's experiencing this is Mass General Hospital.
In the hospital
In the
itself.
hospital, in the bathrooms of the hospital, the addicts will go in, and as you know, they have pull cords in those facilities, and they'll wrap the pull cord around their arm. In the event that they overdose, they'll set off the emergency alarm. So, we see that. We see a number of addicts who are carrying Narcan on their own so that they can help one another. And we carry, as you know, Narcan in every police vehicle, every fire vehicle, and naturally in the ambulance itself. And that's resulted in numerous people being brought back to life.
Yeah. But this must keep your department so busy, just dealing with this.
Well, yeah, yes, that's true, because we're dealing with it. It's not a single prong for us. We have the responsibility to provide that emergency medical care as well as the enforcement side of things. So we've given our offices the Narcan so that they can administer it to help people
Right.
and bring them back to life and hopefully point them in the direction of rehabilitation.
But there is no law that, for instance, if you pick up somebody who's clearly impaired with alcohol, the current state laws allow you to refer them to treatment, correct?
We can take them into protective custody.
Right,
So
but with a heroin addict, there is
ensure
no
the
law that
well-being.
says that.
At this point, no. Our understanding is that it is in the present budget that the governor has before him. So if the governor signs that into law as an outside section of the budget, it will afford the police the opportunity that if someone overdoses, if they won't go to the hospital voluntarily, we
You
can
can
compel them
take
to
them,
go to the
right.
hospital. Unlike alcohol, where if somebody's inebriated, we can bring them to the police station to sober up, we can bring them to a facility, the hospital, or we can even bring them home. This particular statute will allow us to bring them to the hospital, and the key is to get them to the gateway of help. If we can get them into the hospital and have counselors work with them, you'd be amazed at how many people will turn and say, you know what, I do need help, and I'm willing to take it. The flip side, we in not having that, we run into situations where someone wants help, and with addicts, that means now.
Now, not tomorrow.
You can't say, oh, come back, I'll do my best to find you, the right facility. So we're very fortunate to have, the help of Amy Leone
Right.
from Community Impact. Amy is just awesome, so when you're looking for a bed, because and they don't all have to be inpatient.
Right.
Amy will evaluate. Many of them we can just connect them with Spectrum Health, and they can go on to, methadone, Suboxone, so there are a number of other drugs to get them away from the heroin, but also the counseling, so it can be done outpatient.
Right.
So we're very, very fortunate to have that support.
Okay. But outside of the heroin epidemic, Milford's really not a violent town. I don't see many violent crimes occurring. It's more the addiction and then sort of I would call it the low-level breaking and entering to support it. Cars getting robbed.
Right. So most of those crimes in which breaking and enterings into cars, it's either young people who that's the thrill of the time.
Right.
Or it's addicts who are looking for the money to carry them to the next day. So you're right. I mean, we're very fortunate. Milford is a safe community, and I receive calls from people that are looking to buy a home in this community, and they'll ask us, will you give us a listing of the police incidents or calls on a particular street? And we do give it to them. I mean, there's some things we redact because they're so personal in nature.
Right, somebody's name or the incident. or-
Even the listing wouldn't give names, but even the nature of the incident. So we're prohibited from giving out, for instance, domestic violence calls. The law prohibits us from doing that. But sexual assaults, things of that kind, we'll leave the fact that there was an assault, but not the nature of the assault. So in giving people a snapshot, I have to tell you how many people have said to me, I'm going to buy the house because, they had heard, that certain things. So, in some respects, perception becomes reality, and that's what we're trying to overcome. Is that's somebody that's giving you information that's just not accurate. In looking at the issues, I get to ask the question, well, is there anywhere in town you wouldn't go, at night? There's not. I have no concern whatsoever. My wife, my children, I live in the community, so I live in Milford, and I have no fear whatsoever of them going to any neighborhood, any street in this community.
That's true. Recently, you introduced 3 new policemen to the Board of Selectmen. 2 replaced gentlemen who retired, and the 3rd is also a replacement, correct?
All 3 were officers that had retired. One was actually from last year, and we had hired an individual, and as a result of personal circumstances, he could not complete the police academy. So that vacancy reopened. And then I had 2 retirements after that, Officer Dan Ducarel, and Officer Joe Shores, both of whom, Joe Shores served almost 40 years in Milford, and Dan, well into 35 years. So we hired 3 officers. One happens to be the son of Officer Paul Castiglione, so his son Mark, who was a police officer in Warwick, Rhode Island. So he was number 1 on my list, and we brought Mark on board. And then the other 2 individuals grew up in this area, Hopedale, Milford, and were serving as police officers, one in the municipality, the other at the MBTA Transit Police.
So they're transferred in.
They transferred as lateral transfers.
So you have a full complement again.
So now we're at full staff now, once again at 45.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's good because it is less of an adverse impact on my overtime budget, so it's very, very helpful to me.
Yeah, you always win. You save salary over here, but then the overtime goes up.
It's balancing, dollars. Well, and the responsibility to manage the town's money, the taxpayers' money, I take it very serious. I've never gone over budget in 15 years, and I'm just out of my 15th year here in Milford. And, I know the other department heads have the same view in how they manage their financial affairs. So it's critically important. We track it, at this point every week. And then once I come up into April, we track it every single day until the close of the budget.
Yeah. From a crime perspective, though, you said there's no area of town that's a problem.
No, you.
No type of business that's a problem.
No, we just don't have that experience. We do track calls for service or natures of calls. So if we're seeing break-in and enterings, we do plot them. We do plot them not only by location, but by time of the day of the week, weather conditions. I know that sounds a little crazy, but
No, not really to me, but
right. Some people don't like to go out and break into other people's homes in the rainy weather. They don't like to go out in the cold weather. So we do plot out calls as they're occurring. So if we start to see patterns, that's the goal, so that you can apply the appropriate resources at the times that you think are most appropriate as well.
yeah. I know there's been some questions this year about how to patrol the quarries or how to mark them off from swimmers. Right now, it's no trespassing, correct?
Right. So, I mean, the issue is, you know, when I was asked the question, how do we prevent people from going to the quarries? The property owner or the person
Right.
that has control of property has to post a no trespassing. That's the trespassing law. It's not, I'm not telling them to post it. If they don't want to post it, don't post it. But if you want us to enforce your property interest, you have to post it, or you have to give written notice to an individual that you don't want them to come on your property. Otherwise, they're invitees. And the duty that you owe to invitees is greater than that which you owe to trespassers. So that's where the civil side of things comes into play.
Right,
as far
because
as liability.
if I have property that there's a quarry hole on and I don't put no trespassing, and you come over and dive and hit your head, you can sue me.
I firmly believe that's the case, yes. I mean, it's very much as, you know, the postal worker comes to your home every day and you expect them to come.
And if my dog bites them,
Right, or they go up the walkway and slip on ice that you knew was there. You know, you knew that danger existed.
right,
And you didn't mitigate it, then, you know, you can put up a sign that says, you know, postal worker deliver my, you know, my mail at your own risk. Well, no, you're liable. So that's where the balancing comes. From a policing perspective, you know, and I know there are those that feel that somehow I posted no trespassing signs, but I didn't. The board that did was the board that controls that property.
right.
As much as the condo association that owns the other quarry, it was their responsibility to post it. If they want us to enforce their property rights. And that's really what it comes down to. Why post it? It's been crystal clear, I think, for a number of years that it's been discussed. It really comes down to the issue of liabilities.
Yeah, you know, sometimes somebody who's, let's say 15 to 21, possibly carrying some beer, might not be the best person to judge whether they want to jump off a cliff.
Well, you know, on that point too, you know, I have a responsibility to you know, I point out dangers. I highlight situations that I think are hazardous or dangerous. I do that as it relates to certain intersections.
That's, yep.
I'm seeing a number of crashes. You know, I let people know we have a number of bad accidents at this intersection. Even though there are stop signs and all the other warnings, you have to be more careful. And you know, if you remember Water Street at Route 140, highly dangerous.
And you got the light.
And right, and it took 12 years to get the light. During those 12 years, every chance I had.
Well, you used to tell me you avoided that intersection.
I wouldn't drive through that intersection. I would go down side streets off of Water Street and West Street because I firmly believe personally that it's a dangerous intersection. If you want to drive out of the Wendy's driveway at Route 85 and you're going to head towards 495 or Hopkinton,
No thanks.
good luck to you. The odds of you being, you know, in a T-bone car accident is significant. That's a danger. Now, we can put up a sign that says, come out of that driveway at your own risk. That doesn't mitigate my responsibility to highlight the danger. So that's one issue. The second issue is, you know, to suggest that I should feel better knowing that the person's doing it at their own risk. I'm the one that has to go tell the parents of this young person that they're no longer with us.
Right.
You know, so no, I don't feel better about it at all. I've had that experience more than once in this community, and frankly, I don't want to have it again. So that's my position on the quarries. The people that control them, they have the right to determine whether they want to let people in there or not let people in there.
And I think in the case of the one owned by the town, the selectmen have made their decision to say no trespassing.
Yeah, and as a taxpayer in town, so to set aside my responsibilities professionally, as a taxpayer, I think that's the wise decision. It's the wise decision because I don't believe that that particular, not the selectman, but the board that oversees that property, should put that kind of liability knowingly on the taxpayers.
Right, but I also don't think you're not having an officer sit there every day over 80 degrees at each quarry watching them.
You can't. And when we do go up there, it's like herding cats. So, the kids know the woods better than most of us.
I know,
So,
you take the ATV up every now and then and the kids scatter.
right. And, there are other measures that were put in place years ago to discourage going to the quarries. On a number of the streets in that area, it's no parking tow zone. Cars are tagged, they are towed. If they park at the condominiums, the security personnel at the condominiums will call and have those vehicles towed. One, because they don't want the vehicles on their property. The neighbors in those neighborhoods, the residents that live in those neighborhoods, don't want these cars parking all over the place. And we had instances where kids would come from out of state, from Rhode Island, and they would just park in people's driveways because they figured those people were gone for the day, gone to work. Well, in those instances, we've had people come home and they can't get in their own driveway. So,
Wow.
yeah, so there's frustrations, for them as well. I mean, who would want that? Who would be comfortable with that situation? So we have officers respond, and that's exactly how we handle it. We told them.
Well, speaking of driving and parking, a 300-unit apartment complex has been proposed for East Main Street.
Right.
That's a tough area to drive through now, particularly if you're live on the side streets. Getting in and out of their own neighborhoods is kind of tough. What do you think the impact of 300 cars? Well, actually, it could be more than 300 cars.
Yeah.
So 300 housing units.
There's 600 spaces that are being proposed. The projection of vehicles is, the state has one number they use, which is slightly less than that 600. Right. The contractor has another number, which is right about the 600. So,
and his parking study will always show there's no impact.
And
mysteriously, that always happens.
Well, we've not seen any traffic studies yet, so that's the difficult thing. But the plan is to have their driveway, which will be a private roadway,
opposite Whispering Pine.
Line up with Whispering Pine, right? And as you know, there is a incline at that point on Route 16. So you do have some line of sight issues.
But within a couple of months, you're going to have the new cement plant sending some cement trucks, no one knows how many, up that incline very slowly, as they usually are when they set out. Mm-hmm. You have the people in Zane Ridge, you have the people in Whispering Pine, and you just have people going back and forth on that road, all competing for road space.
It's a highly traveled roadway. Route 16
right.
is very busy, particularly during the so-called commuter hours, but all day. I mean, Route 16 is a busy roadway.
Right.
So, right, you're adding, if you figure at peak, even if you had half of those vehicles, you're talking 100 vehicles an hour during peak hours.
Would you prefer, even though you don't have an engineering study, just conceptually, would you prefer a traffic light there?
I raised that issue with the state and with the developer. You have to have what they call the traffic study has to meet the warrant requirements.
Right.
The warrant requirements of the MUTCD, so you have
Yeah.
uniform traffic control. So that's some of what you'd get out of a traffic study is taking a look and seeing what the impacts are from the two side roads, the private one and Whispering Pine, along with the traffic impacts on Route 16. But I think the numbers are higher than the 600 because you still have employees that work there, maintenance personnel and others. You still have visitors that are going to come and go that are visiting those 300 units of people's homes. So I think there's going to be significant impact as far as traffic goes. As far as law enforcement or calls for police services, that facility will require 2 officers minimum.
Because of the height?
Yeah, because you're right, 5 floors. They're building it on top of a garage, so it's actually 6 stories, or 5.5. So the fact that you'd have an officer 5 floors up, if they needed assistance, if the call wasn't as originally defined by the caller, there's a real significant time lapse there. But that's no different than if you take the Tage Inn, some of the other hotels, those are 2 officer calls, regardless of what the nature of the call is.
Because of the size of the building
Simply right.
and the officer's safety.
Right, and if they lock down the elevator on the 5th floor and you're up there by yourself, by the time people hustle up 5 flights to help you, it's not going to be good.
Okay, just to wrap up, because we're almost out of time. There any issues you foresee going on in the town that affect the police department, or is everything just, the matter of the usual daily stuff you encounter?
I think we're really in a good position. The community as a whole, the police department, we have officers that are, highly skilled, that are truly community oriented. People have talked to me about, have you looked at body cameras? I did, but it's a cost-benefit analysis. And when I look at how much it costs, which is really significant.
And the data storage requirements.
Precisely, that's where you get it. It's not the $350 for the camera, it's storing the data, and then secondarily, issuing the data out as a public record. So now you have to go in and redact and, deal with that.
And find it.
Precisely, every single piece of that.
I want to see what happened at 11 p.m. a year ago.
Well, they're saying in many other departments, the large ones, for every officer that has a body camera, for every 5 officers that have body cameras, one department said 4 officers, you have to hire civilian personnel, 1 person full-time.
To manage the footage.
Just to manage that data. So it's just cost prohibitive. We don't have the complaints from citizens. Last year I had 2 complaints from citizens.
Do you have dash cams now?
No dash cams.
So no dash cams, no. But the complaints aren't there.
No. So in looking at it, it's just not the relationship that we have with the community that we serve. And, I'm pleased.
It's not like the cities we hear about where there's a lot of unrest or complaints. You don't have those that much. I mean, the only complaint I've ever heard against you guys is at night some of the officers tend to, let's just say they have a lead foot of responding to a call. But then again, how slowly should they respond to a call?
Well, and again, sometimes it's perception. It's that officer was going to that call too fast. Well, the person we were going to help, I don't think they thought we were going too fast, number one. I mean, the officers they're well trained as far as operation of motor vehicles in those situations. But those are situations that we look at all the time. Are we doing the right thing in going to help someone?
I don't think a person who's sick or a person who's a victim is ever going to complain about response time.
No, and again, sometimes it's perceptions. I get complaints about speeding vehicles in neighborhoods on different streets, and that's why we have the black boxes that we can put out and measure it. And lo and behold, when the information comes back, the data, you just don't have a speed issue there,
I remember moving onto a street about 20 years ago, and in the first week I lived there, this guy would always, go to me like this to slow down. So I pulled over one day. I said, "What is the issue? I'm driving at 20 miles an hour." I said, "I'm watching the speedometer because you think I'm going fast." And he goes, "No, you're doing more like 40 or 50. I said, "I'm doing 20. And it was the style of the car made it look like it was going fast. So you can't win sometimes.
Well, they've done studies on that, and you can look them up. I'll never buy a red car.
Oh, red cars are always the cars that get targeted for speeding.
So.
Anyway, we're out of time, Chief. I want to thank you for coming in.
Happy to be here.
And give us an update on stuff, and we'll have you back in another year, see how
Great.
things are going.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks again.